Welcome into the Cowboys Report. Tom Downey here, back again with Jane Slater for the latest Around America's team. Jane, nice to have you back after a little bit of a holiday break, we'll call it.
Good to see you. Yeah, we've, it's been interesting with the schedule for the Cowboys this year. And look, full disclosure, I thought I had COVID, but 2 negative tests said I did it. So back in the saddle again. Didn't want to get you sick, Tom.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's talk about the offense here to begin today's show, which was a heavy storyline for weeks, months, maybe. Are they back, or is it all fixed now after that 56-point output against Washington?
You know, you find yourself wondering if it is in fact fixed or if this was just a really, really bad Washington football team, considering they were on a short week, all the COVID cases. This was not a team that was necessarily up to snuff from necessarily what we expect. But I think for me what stood out was the creativity of this offense, getting the ball back to guys like Amari Cooper, seeing Dak Prescott use those wheels again in the running plays, and him telling me after the game that this is about as healthy as he's felt. And then the week before that, I had Ezekiel Elliott saying the same. So I think if the Cardinals game, I think is going to be really a good indication of what this offense is capable of. But I think what stood out to me is the health of this team. It seems like, and the word they kept using, Tom, was peaking at the right time.
I think that's a key element for Dallas as they do enter the final stretch here. Dak played really well. It looked like he had more confidence in everything. That interior offensive line, the receiving core, the calf, I think, to an extent. Is he just back now? And how much, I think, at this point, too, I want to mention Kellen Moore. Play calling seemed more confident, too. I think the phrase fastball came a couple times, of going more tempo as well.
Yeah, we saw them operating essentially no huddle is what they're calling this fastball up-tempo offense is what Amari Cooper had described this week. Essentially, guys are learning to play different positions on the field. And so we've talked for a long time. They've got so many weapons, pick your poison. You're not only having to pick your poison, but you're not necessarily anticipating where the guys are lining up. And so I think that has absolutely helped him. But I think more than anything, it's Dak's trust in his own body. You know, he kept saying that he wasn't injured, that this slump had nothing to do with the rust, et cetera. But I do think that there was maybe some doubts about his mobility. And, you know, when you've gone through some of the injuries that he's had this year, who could fault a guy for being a little bit reluctant for putting his body on the line? So I think that in combination with, you know, we've talked about this offensive line a lot, Tom. Mm-hmm. Connor Williams, say what you will about him, but I think benching him for a couple of weeks and then adding him back to that lineup has given that left side the stability that it was really missing.
And that offensive line looks better with Connor Williams involved, and he's avoided the penalties so far, which is always, as of late, which is a nice part there. The run game looks so much better with Connor Williams involved, and we will get to Tyron Smith here in just a little bit on that front. But before we do that, let's get to our pinned question of the day. Is the Cowboys offense back? Are they good to go moving forward? Type in Y for yes or type in N for no. Like I mentioned, this is the pinned comment on today's video. So if you get the ad break here on YouTube, take advantage of it. Head down to that pinned comment, type in Y for yes or N for no. Let's go now to Tyron Smith. The Joneses, I think I grammar spelling formatted that right. Joneses, then another ES at the end. Is it
You're
Jones
good there.
I
You're good there.
They're saying he's going to be back against the Cardinals. Is that going to be the case, or is that the Dr. Jones is speaking out of turn again?
You know, I've said this to you before, Tom. It's hard to say with Mike McCarthy and this new regime because before we sort of took Jerry's word early in the week as Bible. Kim Kardashian, Keeping Up the Kardashian quote, if you guys aren't familiar with it. It was Bible. But we've seen that change. So hard to say, but I would tell you that they seem very optimistic about his return. And then, of course, this would be the week to do it against the Arizona Cardinals. Arizona Cardinals have been in a bit of a slump. It might be my fault after I did Monday Night Football. They lost to the Rams, and they've been reeling ever since. Apologies to the Cards. But I do think this would be a good week for them to really get a sense of what sort of team they've got as they make that push through the playoffs. And, of course, they're still playing for the number 1 seed here. So if there's a week to get Tyron Smith involved, this would certainly be the one. And it does seem that some of the rest and the way they've been managing these injuries for some of these veterans has worked in their favor this year.
I think I think you're right on Arizona with the playoff stuff, which we'll spend a little bit more time on here in a little bit, really coming into picture. And Dallas still alive for that number 1 seed, and I think they'd love to get that bye as well, which, who wouldn't want the bye, of course, but.
I just think, honestly, Tom, side note, it's just crazy after covering this team last year and all of the problems that they had. It seemed like everything that could go wrong did. And even with the adversity this season, the fact that we're talking about a Cowboys team after last year potentially playing for the number 1 seed in the NFC, that is wild to me. And I guess maybe it's just that being around the team and knowing how bad things actually were in that locker room, to see them get the chemistry and see them playing the way that they have this year, in spite of the injuries, COVID, et cetera, I think is special.
All right, so I'm going to put both the audience and you on the spot here, Jane. I want you to give me a % chance that Tyron Smith plays this week.
I'll go 85%.
Okay, I like that number. That's a high number. That makes me feel pretty good from that perspective. So, again, folks, take the advantage of it. Get your comments in for me in the comment section right now. % chance that Tyron Smith plays this week against the Cardinals. Now, Dallas has already clinched the NFC East, and if you want to get some NFC East championship gear, head over to chatsports.com/Cowboys NFC East. That link, which is in both the comment section and the description right now, will take you to Fanatics, where you can get all of the championship gear. I like the Run the East gear myself because that applies to more than just 2021, and with a healthy Dak Prescott, that has very much been the case for Dallas in the division. It's chatsports.com/Cowboys NFC East. More offensive line talk here, and I asked you to try to figure out what you can for me on this one because I got a theory on it. Josh Ball last week was a surprise designated to return from IR. Why that, and what's potentially going on there?
Great question. I actually put out some calls on that. Haven't heard anything back just yet. I mean, we've certainly seen him around the facility. And we've sort of wondered what the deal is with him. I don't know if this has been a numbers thing this year because he wasn't necessarily ready to go and they could only have so many guys called up with certain positions that they needed extra bodies. But yeah, I mean, it looks like designated to return. We'll see if he actually does return here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I know that what you're able to do is you have the 3-week practice window. So if injuries happen on the offensive line, then cool, you can bring him back. If not, you got him some valuable practice time and keep him on IR for the rest of the year. I wonder if that'll be their path. How about Blake Jarwin? The Cowboys keep saying closer, and he'll do some more rehab work. Is he all that close, though?
You know, I talked to somebody about this a couple of weeks ago, and it did sound like maybe he would be available for you in the playoffs, and that would be intriguing. Blake Jarwin was once the sort of security blanket at tight end for Dak Prescott, and in his absence, we've seen Dalton Schultz, just go off. So getting both of those guys in there, the problem is they've never really had blocking tight ends, but he's definitely capable of being a receiving threat for you. And certainly gives you another element, especially when you consider, what was it, after this game, 19 different Cowboys have caught a pass this season for a touchdown. And I'm not talking necessarily about guys on offense. I mean, we're talking defense and even special teams at this point. So getting another weapon back would be huge for them.
Yeah, so we'll see about Blake Jarwin as the season moves on. Of course, the regular season is almost over at this point. Dallas currently sits in the number 2 seed, behind the Packers, ahead of the Rams and Bucks, thanks to some weird tiebreaker stuff there.
AFC, isn't that wild?
It's just crazy, right? Now, the Cowboys rather publicly have been talking about, hey, we want that number 1 seed, which I think is the right mindset, especially because it guarantees home field advantage. And for whatever reason, especially on offense, at home, this team has been so much different, Jane.
Well, and I've covered this team for years, grew up obviously in this area, and the fan base has come by it, honestly, the wine and cheese crowd, and they weren't that engaged at games, and I think that was frustrating for teams. But to be fair, you didn't really put a product on the field worth cheering for a while. But I will tell you, it was Dak Prescott after the game when I said, what's your message to fans that would love to see this team return back to those glory days in the mid-'90s without saying the word? And he made a point of mentioning the importance of the crowd and how that crowd has galvanized him. And you really saw that on full display when you saw Trevon Diggs get that pick, first play of the game. Tyler Heineke, I don't know what he was thinking there. Or Taylor Heineke, I don't know what he was thinking in that situation. But you saw the fan base really galvanize in the stadium. And so they have been successful at home, particularly guys like Amari Cooper and Dak Prescott. For whatever reason, at home is where they shine. And I guess to some extent that makes sense to the fans. Why wouldn't you be good at home? But they are exceptionally good at home. I think they're putting up on average 40 points on offense in the last 11 full games that Dak has played.
That's ridiculous.
Isn't that crazy?
That's an absolutely ridiculous stat. That's unheard of production right there. What's also unheard of is one YouTube channel of covering a Cowboys team having more subscribers than the Cardinals and Washington, and I think we're about to catch your Giants, by the way, producer Marshall. So let's keep it rolling. If you want more free videos on the Dallas Cowboys, you've come to the right spot. Hit that big red button and subscribe today for more videos from me, from Jane, and from both of us as well right here at the Cowboys Report. All right, I wanted to spend some time now on the cornerback room. We'll get to Kelvin Joseph. I know what the answer. I got to ask a question about him anyway. Trevon Diggs, though, did it again. By the way, what was Washington doing? Deep shot against Diggs, first play of the game.
I don't know if they thought they'd test it early and see if they could get some momentum there, but I would submit that took the energy out of whatever they thought that they were bringing to the stadium. And again, they were on a short week. They'd had their game rescheduled because of COVID. I mean, they've been through a lot this year. I mean, think of all the quarterbacks they've been through. I mean, it's been a tough season for them, so much so that it ended up with a fight amongst teammates erupting on the sidelines. That was entertaining.
Those heated benches.
Yes, but I would argue that it was that particular play call and that play that Trevon Diggs made that, I mean, if you look at it after that, the Cowboys, I think they scored on every drive after that. And so I think that was a
long
pivotal moment.
Long sustained drives, too.
Yeah, that was a really pivotal moment for them. And, I actually thought that Trevon Diggs was going to get another interception in the game. But how about Everson Walls talking about, he's now tied franchise record, most interceptions in a single season. He thinks he's going to easily get to 12. But just talking about the nuances between him and, other guys in this league, I mean, we just really haven't seen guys like Trevon Diggs doing what he's doing. I mean, he has more interceptions this season individually than some teams have as a group.
It's just insane. What was also, I thought, quite impressive, by the way, was the play of Kelvin Joseph getting the start, I'll call it. Anthony Brown sliding out a nickel with Jourdan Lewis on the COVID list. That was about as good of a game as you could have hoped for out of the young second pick who's barely played this season.
Well, I was about to say, he's had a lot of time to have fresh legs there, Tom. He's very active on his social media. I don't know if you're into rap, but
Boss Man Fat.
Yeah, he's got some drip there. What's interesting about him is I had heard from a lot of LSU folks that they'd reached out to the Cowboys and said, stay far away from this guy. This guy is not going to make sense in Dallas. And I think with us not seeing him this season and doing much, I think there was a big question mark on him. But to your point, I thought he did a nice job for the Cowboys. And I just think a lot of this goes back to Dan Quinn. He has gotten so much out of so many of these players. And I said this to you a couple weeks ago. I don't think that Micah Parsons would be having the season that Micah Parsons is if Mike Nolan and Jim Tomsula were heading up this defense anymore. I think it's the creativity of Dan Quinn maximizing these guys and their skill set, and I think we're seeing that with guys like Kelvin Joseph.
So now what is the plan for Kelvin Joseph? In theory, Jourdan Lewis comes back from the COVID list this week. I know what the fan base wants, so I'm going to ask it. Any chance he starts this week?
Absolutely not. Yeah, no, I think you ride with Jourdan Lewis.
I think you're also at the point, and I'm sure I'll make this point 1,000 times next couple of weeks. The defense is working, like really well, so maybe don't change that.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Now, I will still give you guys a chance to comment, but you heard the answer from Jane already. Should Kelvin Joseph start at cornerback? I think you feel great about his long term, but short term, what do you think? 1 for yes, 2 for no. The NFL has 2 weeks left in the regular season, and they changed the rules this week this year, to allow teams to interview coaches early. There's going to be a lot of interest in Dan Quinn and Kellen Moore, isn't there? How worried should Cowboys fans be about one or both of those two guys getting head coaching jobs elsewhere?
I mean, look, Kellen Moore interviewed for the Eagles job. He was up for Boise State, and he ended up staying. I think Dan Quinn's probably the one you should be more concerned about. Look, worst comes to worst, you got a guy like Mike McCarthy who can call plays. I've always said it's been culpable deniability since he's been here, that if the offense doesn't click, he can say, well, I wasn't calling the plays. But Dan Quinn, I just keep going back to just what a remarkable turnaround it's been for this defense and the way that he's getting guys, even DeMarcus Lawrence. I mean, the way that DeMarcus Lawrence has been playing, granted, a lot of that is probably he was sitting on his couch, hated being the elder statesman in the locker room and not being able to contribute to the success this season. But to see the way that he's played since he's been back and to see what he's getting out of even guys like Anthony Brown and Jourdan Lewis, I think Dan Quinn is an integral part of this team. And I think what we're seeing now is coaches, I talked to a head coach about this here recently. The league is going to a situation now where I'm not saying you get scrubs off the street, but you can get away with putting together your roster in such a way if you have really great coaches. And I think Dan Quinn is a perfect example of that, because while they put a lot of stock in their draft picks, they also got a lot of guys like Jourdan Lewis and whatnot off the street. And you didn't expect Keanu Neal, Jourdan Lewis, and these guys to play the way that they have this year. And so I think you're going to see something very similar to what you saw with Sean Payton a couple years back. You throw all the money at him and keep him from leaving. And I've really sort of loved the answers from Dan Quinn, talking about how the loss of the job to the Falcons was sort of the thief of joy for him for football, and how it's come back as a defensive coordinator. And look, it worked for him when he was with Seattle. Maybe he just wants to sit here and not have all the responsibility sometimes that comes with that head coach job. But he will be in the mix.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. I think that Seahawks job in particular worries me, if in the event it ends up coming open. Who's more important to this Cowboys team? Type KM for Kellen Moore, or type in DQ for Dan Quinn. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section. I'll give you a chance to go some brief thoughts here on the Cardinals matchup and any insights you've got in terms of how the Cowboys are prepping for this very important Week 17 matchup.
Look, like I said, Washington was not exactly an opponent that was at full strength when they put up 56 points on them, but I thought it gave them the momentum and the energy and the confidence they needed to take that through the playoffs. And the Cardinals, like I said, I covered the Monday Night Football game when they played the Rams. They've just been spiraling lately. And if you actually look at them in the last couple seasons, or last 2, 3, they sort of have these mid-season collapses. And so while that was a game that I circled on my calendar as, man, that's going to be a tough one for Dallas, I think Dallas has got a real opportunity in this one.
I think they do too, and the Cardinals have just hit a weird rough patch. The offense isn't working quite as well. The defense isn't as great as it was at the beginning of the year. Win this game. It's a big deal for the Cowboys' #1 seed chances. And Jane, I want to thank you again for coming by, and we'll see you again next week, right?
Always a pleasure. Love talking ball with you.